Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You are in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Choosing the right customer relationship management software, better known as CRM, helps businesses that are ramping up their revenue to keep track of leads, deals, and contacts as a whole. It really helps to connect the dots between your marketing efforts and your revenue achievement. But how do you go about choosing the right CRM? To discuss that topic, I'm joined by Scott Brinker, VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot and editor at chiefmartech.com. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Hi, wonderful to be here with you, Jen.
Yeah, really great to have you on. You know, we're big fans of HubSpot here at GrowGetter, and but we also, work on a lot of different CRM platforms, and there's so many different options out there. And you know this better than anyone else. I know you've done those landscapes of different tech platforms in all different industries. But, choosing the right one is really critical at different stages for businesses. So I'm excited to dig into that topic with you today.
Oh, I'm excited as well. Martech nerd that I am. Let's talk CRMs.
Awesome. We'll nerd out a little bit today. So let's start with the basics. Like, why do companies need a CRM to begin with?
Well, the CRM is really ideally the system of record that's like at the center of your customer tech stack. We live obviously now in a totally digital age. There are so many digital activities happening in the way we engage with customers, the way in which we actually run our sales, marketing, internal service organizations. These are all, digitally operated and run at this point too, and so with all this different activity and all these moving parts, what you're looking for is that center of gravity, the thing that's actually going to provide some sort of cohesion, to this orbit of engagements and activities with customers. And that's really what I believe a CRM, its primary purpose should be that center of gravity in your customer tech stack.
Yeah, that's so important, like to have a single source of truth for what is happening. And this is, I think, actually a challenge that a lot of people have is not only having a CRM for that purpose, but actually using it for that purpose. Because a lot of times there's like that one data point that somehow doesn't fit into your CRM and that lives in a doc somewhere else. And so maybe we'll dig into that topic too. But, with that in mind, it's sort of being your center of gravity. I like the way you've described that. What are some of the most important features to look for when choosing a CRM? And I guess, does that differ for different types of businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, part of it, the difference here is the maturity of the organization, the stage they're at in their development. All right, so we were saying like the CRM is the center of gravity, the system of record. So one of the key things with a system of record is, does it have a data model that's going to support your customers? So this is very often not just what you get out of the box, I'm going to have companies, I'm going to have contacts, and I'm going to have deals. Yes, that's good. But you have the option of, if you want to create custom objects to model particular aspects of your business. Let's say you have a lot of business that goes through partners and a partner network. You associate partners with customers and contacts, things like this. So that's just sort of like bread and butter. Like, all right, will this actually serve our needs as the system of record for our customer operations? Second thing I tend to look at is usability. There's hundreds of different CRMs out there. You can definitely look at a wide variety, of choices. But to me, like at the end of the day, having people actually use the CRM is a function of the experience for the employees. It's the experience for salespeople. It's the experience that service people have with it, even up to the degree that your marketing organization is leveraging the CRM as the center of gravity for some of the other efforts they're doing. All these things, sort of come down to like how usable, the product is. And then maybe the last piece I'd throw out here is, bias alert here. I spent a lot of time thinking about all these different MarTech and sales tech products out there and how they connect together. And I've come to the belief that more than anything else, to really harness the value out of all that innovation that's happening in the MarTech and sales tech world, you need a CRM platform that's actually going to treat integrations and a connected ecosystem to these other tools that you might want to plug into it as a first-class feature of what it's really looking to deliver. So I would definitely evaluate CRMs based on their ecosystem as well, too.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because for most businesses out there that are maybe choosing a CRM for the first time, it's not the only piece of tech in their stack. So needing to it would be lovely if we could just run our whole businesses right within one platform. But oftentimes there's accounting systems, there's all kinds of other systems that are getting used. And the further integrated they are with the CRM, it's just so much easier for it to actually be that center of truth for you. Like I said, I was saying this before, you could just so easily be managing stuff in all these different places, the data, and then it doesn't really line up. And that creates a disjointed experience.
Yeah, both for your employees and then ultimately for your customers. So.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what you were saying too, just about the usability. I had this conversation with somebody like a week ago of oh, we have this CRM, but people don't really use it. And if it's not being used, or it's not easy enough, or it's not, the training is too hard or whatever, then people aren't going to use it. And then all of a sudden it doesn't have the data you need in it anymore. And that's not going to be useful either.
Yeah, and people often talk, CRMs have grown over the years. They have a lot of functionality. If you're looking at any of the CRMs from any of the major companies out there, right, there's a lot of functionality, a lot of capabilities that these products pack into them. But the ability for your teams to actually tap into those capabilities and put them to productive use very much does come back to this thing about usability. Oh, well, I can learn how to do this and I can discover this. And oh, I see how this tool is related, to this functionality over there. To really, harness the utilization of a CRM, not just for people getting data in for it, but taking advantage of all the innovative features that these products are adding continuously. Yeah, usability is sort of your path through the woods.
Oh yeah, totally. One thing I find interesting is that and you're thinking about what to evaluate, cost hasn't really come up. And there's such a wide variety of pricing models for these sorts of tech, this sort of tech. So, I guess the features that you're describing really factor into how much you're willing to spend on a particular piece. But do you have any opinion on, the more expensive, the less expensive, the middle of the road, or how to value that functionality that you're going to get from the different pricing options?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right to look at cost. I think my advice to most companies would be, all right, there's the cost of the software in the sense of all right, well, what is the annual subscription, fees I'm going to pay for the product? But in a lot of cases, particularly if you're a growing business, that isn't really where the cost is. The cost is going to be, the implementation, the maintenance, the training of people to leverage it, the, work that people need to do to be able to take advantage of it. It goes back to that usability. If you have 50 salespeople and each of them waste an hour, a week because they're having a hard time engaging properly and using your CRM properly, that's actually a real cost. That you want those salespeople not futzing around with the CRM. You want them actually out there selling. And so the tech phrase that we use for this stuff is total cost of ownership, TCO. And I absolutely think when you're looking at buying and implementing a CRM system, looking at the TCO of what are going to be all the components of really being successful with this platform, you want to take that into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, the integration piece, like if you could kind of piece together a bunch of different platforms that might be cheaper, or if you've got like a one-stop shop where you can integrate and there's more functionality, then it might cost you more dollar-wise, but to your point, the time that's invested and the ease of use you're kind of saving. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So once, companies are kind of evaluating that functionality, making sure they've got the data models they need and everything that you've described in choosing the right platform for their business, how, I guess, what are some of the differences they might want to consider based on, what that functionality is, the stage of their business? Like, how should they go about choosing?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is that a CRM, if it's really going to be effective as the center of gravity in your overall customer stack, is it's not just a sales tool. It's not just a marketing tool. It's something that marketing, sales, customer service, your IT team is probably going to be connecting, to pull data. If you have an analytics team, your finance team is going to want to be able to get access, so you've got a lot of stakeholders. If you do CRM right, if you really are doing it as that center of gravity, the underlying foundation, and so I think first and foremost, when you're looking at choosing a platform like this, you want to be able to assemble the right people. Now, the world of business is full of many, humorous anecdotes about, committees, so you want to be careful here. I think one of the things to do when you're approaching, selecting and implementing a CRM is you do want to think about all these stakeholders, but I also think it's good to, without getting too heavy in process on this, like to create something like a DOSI model, like to really understand, okay, these are the different contributors who are going to be a part of these stakeholders, but who's the decider here? Who's approving this? What are the responsibilities, of the different teams that are going to be taking advantage of this, and what should they be evaluating, that platform on? To spend a little bit of, given how impactful a CRM can be, and the likelihood that once you actually implement a CRM, you're going to be with it for a while, investing a little upfront effort and like really getting that mapped out for the process and making sure you've got all the right people involved, that dramatically increases the odds on the other side of this that you're going to get the outcome you want.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. Because I think that there's the sort of reason to start looking for a new CRM or one to begin with. And then there's a trickle effect to all the different people that might benefit from it or need to use it, or even like change management in terms of process internally. So I just had this conversation with somebody a week or two ago who was wanting to implement a CRM. This is a business who's been operating outside of CRM for a very long time and now is looking to adopt it. And the question I asked was like, are all of your teams like ready to change their processes to run this stuff through this system as opposed to the way they're used to doing it? Because that's a heavy lift for companies that have, sort of, this is how we handle client work or projects or new business or whatever. So it's not just this would benefit marketing to have this in here. It's the whole company has to adopt it in order for it to be the most effective.
Yeah, I think what you said about change management is huge on this, which is, again, one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate for, companies like GrowGetter, who just provide enormous value to customers who, particularly if it's a new thing for them, like, oh, we're finally going to get a CRM to orchestrate across these different teams. Or if it's something like, well, we've had this old CRM, it's not really worked out the way we wanted it to, now we want to up level, we want to move to the next, generation. We really want to get it right. There's so much advantage to tapping into the expertise of solutions providers, services firms, consultancies who have seen this movie. They've seen it across, client after client after client. They've developed a framework for like helping people get organized and thinking about the selection process. But more important, once they actually make that selection, right, that isn't the finish line. That is actually the starting line, and it's really helping to guide people through that process of, okay, not just how you implement this, but how do you truly adopt it? How do you make it a part of your business operations to really get the maximum value?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really good point. We should dive into the sort of implementation, like, once you have made that selection and you're ready, like, I guess maybe it'd be good to touch on some of the differences too. If you're just implementing one from the start, a fresh CRM when you didn't have one before versus, migrating from one to another. But what are some of the tips you would give when actually starting the implementation process? Because you're right, that's the starting line. Selecting the CRM is the starting line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about some of this. So like, get the ownership model clear, like the different stakeholders, their relationship, how they're going to work together. I think to the degree that you are new to this, or you don't have, sufficient expertise internally, getting aligned, with a services partner, a consultant who resonates with you, that you really can trust in helping to guide you through that process. Looking at it as not just what's involved in standing up the CRM, but what's actually involved in like the 90 days, the 6 months, the 1 year. What does adoption actually look like? And to have a set of milestones and clarity of just the steps that are need to be taken across teams to deliver, on those milestones. Again, I'm one of these people who, I look at a lot of MarTech, a lot of sales tech, and there are a lot of great tools out there that you can just grab off the shelf and you can play around and you can experiment and you can do something fun with. But there's a few systems, in a company that are just so foundational to how everything else is going to operate, and CRM is one of those that I think why they say like measure twice, cut once approach to that CRM implementation. I can't emphasize that enough.
I like that analogy, the measure twice, cut once. I think that's so important because I have seen systems get implemented, maybe skipping some steps or even making decisions on what CRM is best for your company based on what other companies use, or, not doing a thorough vetting process. And you're right, like, you really do. It's so foundational that getting it wrong can actually be a challenge. And I think you started to touch on this, like having milestones in place. Like, how do you measure the success of a CRM implementation? How do you know that like you're doing it right? Because I don't think it's ever really done, but you're on the right track and things are working the way that you intended them to.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a question that comes up a lot in MarTech. People very much want to look at, okay, what is going to be the ROI of implementing a certain technology or a certain capability? And not to dissuade anyone from thinking about that. I think that is a wonderful lens to bring to things. But there are some technologies that become a little bit easier for that. Like if you're running like a particular ad tech platform and, and you're running things through this, I mean, there's a very quantified amount of money that we're spending in these ads and what's the efficacy of that, But when you start to look at what I would call these foundational systems, something like a CRM that's going to be that center of gravity for so many other things, it is actually very hard to just like, and here's the ROI of new deals that we can attribute to the CRM, because there were so many activities that ended up happening, around that to actually deliver that business, just attribution gets wacky. So I actually go in the other direction of these foundational systems and say like, okay, ultimately the measurement, well, let's use the center of gravity metaphor. Let's see if we can truly overextend this to the point that people start throwing things at me. Is if I think of, something like the sun at the center of our solar system, there's kind of two things here, right? There's gravity, this thing that holds the solar system together, and I think one of the ways you can evaluate the success of a CRM platform is the degree to which you actually now have cohesion across these teams. The history of marketing and sales has not always been wine and roses. There's very often been cases where it's just like, okay, what are the handoffs? Are we aligned? How are things flowing smoothly operationally between marketing and sales? And a great CRM platform isn't going to magically solve this for you, but very often it's the great CRM platform can provide the technical capabilities to be able to deliver, that sort of cohesion across marketing and sales. And if you've got good usability and if you've sort of got a good architecture to that, it actually makes it easier, And so I think you've got a great CRM implementation when you see that the way in which your marketing and sales teams and your sales and service teams, and the other stakeholders, in finance or IT who are able to plug into this, that they're actually all able to cooperate, and the systems are not creating the friction. In fact, if anything, the systems are helping to smooth and accelerate, that flywheel. So the other thing I would look at is if that's sort of the gravity. Do you see the cohesion happening across teams and activities? The other is really the energy, right? The solar energy that we get from that, shining sun of a CRM. And I sort of think of it this way: is being a little bit more from marketing myself, I appreciate that there's like an infinite number of ideas, that marketers are constantly coming up with, right? We live in a world where, there's new innovations happening every day. We're always trying to come up with new ways to differentiate ourselves, and very noisy and competitive marketers, and marketers are just some of the most creative people on the planet for figuring out, okay, how do we work this? How do we stand out? But then very often, once you've got this universe of ideas, there's the like, oh, how do we actually do that? Can we actually do that? Is that actually possible? And then again, the nature of brainstorming a whole bunch of ideas is you want to sort of filter them out and, okay, here's, which ones actually do seem to make sense and which ones do we want prioritized and so on. But the degree to which your underlying CRM platform is not a bottleneck, that it's not the barrier preventing those ideas. You might choose to do an idea or not do an idea based on other filters, like, all right, do we actually think we can get the ROI here? Do we have the right human talent, here? There's a bunch of those things. But if people were, should not be running into these things of like, yeah, we have this amazing idea. We really want to prioritize this. We know how we're measured. We know we've got the talent for this, but our CRM platform isn't going to let us get this data, or, oh my goodness, trying to connect the workflow from this thing to something else. We're going to need to hire like a dedicated software engineer just to figure that out. Looking at a CRM platform as being successful, when it becomes the source of energy to allow that experimentation for new ideas to just flow. Again, how do you capture that on a spreadsheet? Not easy, but I think in reality, if you do an honest assessment of how much cohesion do we have across our teams and how much is our technology, either preventing or enabling us from doing the experiments and activities we want, it's a pretty good scorecard for, do you have the right CRM in place?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that metaphor. And I love how you just kind of wrap that up about the ability to experiment in a data-driven and, really smart way. Because there's so much that happens in marketing that doesn't work or doesn't work right away. And if you're not really measuring it, people can run the same campaigns for ages and ages and ages, hoping they might turn around or something, and really creating an environment where you can experiment and you can fail quickly and shut things down and turn new things on and know exactly what's working and what's not. I almost think the quantifiable, this is the qualitative maybe ROI is, does this feel like it's making your system smoother and you're more cohesive across teams? But the quantitative ROI is really, does everything else perform better because you're making decisions based on the data you have in the CRM? Maybe it's not on a spreadsheet, that one data point, but it's all the data points. Is everything working better?
Yeah, rising tide lifts all boats. I love that. Yes,
exactly. And I just love a data-driven strategy. And it's not possible if you don't have all the data going into one place and kind of all of the different stakeholders, as you mentioned, looking at the same source of truth. You've got people looking at all different data points saying, well, my data says this and my data says that, like having it all there, that center of gravity, like just makes such a huge difference. Okay. Because I've seen some really good CRM implementations and some really bad ones, or ones that just like devolve over time, right? From different custom work or whatever. Like, I guess, what are some common mistakes to avoid when both choosing and implementing and using a CRM?
Yeah, wow. There's no lack of things we could draw from there. So again, one of the things we started with, I'll just emphasize it again, is a CRM at its best is an underlying platform to orchestrate across your business. So if you make siloed purchase decisions, that's basically like one group drives it, and they don't really involve all the right stakeholders. Inevitably, that leads to disappointment and tears down the line. I think the second thing is, we were talking earlier about how robust so many of these CRMs have. They have so many capabilities, but that at the same time, usability really does become your path through figuring out how to harness all that incredible power. And this is something that I find if in the sales process with a CRM vendor, you're relying too much on slideware, that they're giving you the fixed presentation or they're giving you the fixed demo. Surprise, surprise, everything in those presentations and everything in those fixed demos always works perfect. I mean, occasional exception for Murphy's Law. They're designed to orchestrate, hey, this is how beautiful and smooth it could be. I highly recommend that if at all possible, get a copy that you can actually play with. I mean, you're not trying to like implement your whole company, on the sly here, but to be able to even get like a, free version or a starter version of something, just to get people to, get the feel for what it's like. And even if you have a couple use cases, I always love to come into the, selection process with very concrete use cases for my particular business, to be able to say like, okay, yeah, I know you've shown me the demos of various things out of the box, the way you'd craft them. Here's a particular idea I have for like, we want to do this kind of campaign, or we want to do this kind of program, or we want to orchestrate things between marketing and sales this specific way. How would we actually implement that? And to be able to just walk through the real software, take it for a spin, I think is going to save you, again, just surprises down the road of being like, wait a second, this seems harder than it was when they were showing me the slides. I guess third mistake, again, we'll come back to this one more time on looking at total cost of ownership. If you simply are comparing what the, seat licenses or subscription costs are, and you're not taking into consideration, well, okay, how much is it going to take to actually get this implemented? If we're going to hire a third party to help us with that, what are those costs going to be like? What are we going to need as far as like staffing for this? Is this something that we're going to need, half of one person's time to help with managing this? Or are we going to need like a team of 3, like, dedicated admins that, have a certain set of certifications that are, incredibly highly demanded on the market. Can we even find those people? It's like just looking through that process, talking to other customers who have had that CRM platform, and asking them, hey, listen, not just in year 1, but year 2, what did you, estimate as your cost for maintaining this, year 3, and so on. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's definitely other mistakes we could draw upon. Some people have come up with very novel and innovative mistakes with CRMs, but it feels like those are the 3 that we see like again and again that hopefully we can steer most people away from.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there's lots of creative ways to maybe not implement CRM properly. But I think the point you made about the slideware, I mean, we could even take CRM out of that sentence, like any technology. Like, how often have I like invested in a new technology only to find it didn't do exactly what I wanted it to do, or not in the way I wanted it to happen? So the good news is that we kind of live in a world where there's a lot more freemium and free trial type tech platforms out there than there ever were before. So you really can get in and play with different functionality. But that's such a great tip to like not really rely on the demo or, you know, the videos, but actually get in there as much as you can. Obviously, like you said, you can't implement your whole CRM on, you know, a 14-day trial. But at least you can, you know, get the most important functionality out of the way, and make sure that it's gonna suit your needs for sure.
And I'm always much more of a fan of like true freemium rather than like just free trial because of that exact thing you said of like 14 days. Again, one of the things you're trying to do with a CRM purchase is get all the right stakeholders involved. And I find whatever your deadline is, if it's a 14-day trial, I assure you the one stakeholder that you were actually wanting to, you know, close the loop with, you know, isn't going to be around until day 15. So try not to be under those constraints if you don't have to be.
Right. Speaking of Murphy's Law, right? So what sort of best practices might you share with, you know, once the CRM is implemented for actually using it to its max potential?
Yeah, always a more positive view. All right, not what not to do, but here's what to do. So I think one thing to just keep in mind is, again, as a foundational platform, and my camera is looking a little fuzzy, so I'm going to try and reset that. You know, I often look better when it gets more fuzzy, but all right, well, it doesn't seem to be cooperating with me on that. So yes, I'm diffuse. Anyways, all right. So best practices for the CRM system, because these are relatively complex systems. If they're if they're the center of gravity, you know, for everything. You know, that you're running across marketing, sales, and service, then you want to make sure that you've got someone who's really the owner of that platform, who's really looking at it from an ops perspective. Now, if you're a small company, this might be just someone's part-time responsibility, but nonetheless, you like identify, okay, who's the person running the ops for this platform? As you get into larger businesses, you probably will actually have a dedicated person who's leading, whether they call it rev ops, revenue ops, or perhaps you might have someone in marketing ops and someone in sales ops, you know, but really identifying who the people are who are going to own this platform, because for them, it's not just about, you know, from a technical configuration or a technical operation perspective, but it's like setting up the processes and the governance and managing who has the ability to, you know, make changes here or, you know, like set up new workflows there. Because if you just sort of leave it entirely like open-ended, it just, you know, people get very creative and you have lots of different people doing very creative things. And next thing you know, you've got a bit of a rat's nest. So yeah, having some sort of like clear ops ownership, you know, that is the human version of the center of gravity for that platform is just super helpful. All right, I'm being advised on like a way to try and, hey, all right. I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse, but you be the judge. All right, so there's that ops role. And then the second thing I'd say is, you know, a CRM platform, it's a living thing. You know, you were talking earlier here about, you know, changes that happen in marketing and, all right, we try something, this doesn't necessarily work, or maybe it worked for a period of time, you know, and then things change in the market and expectations change with customers. You're like, okay, that old approach didn't take, we're going to try a different way to adjust it, you know. And so CRMs being that orchestration system, that center of gravity at all of this, they do evolve, and you're adding new data. You might be changing the way, you know, a certain workflow works. You might be, you know, changing a certain process, which is all great. But it's really important to recognize that the work of cleaning up the old stuff that is no longer relevant is really important too. You know, it's a hygiene. You know, thing. And sometimes we talk about, you know, data quality and data cleanliness and data hygiene, which is a part of this. But I would argue it's even broader. It is really looking at that whole platform and saying, okay, not only are we going to be continually evolving new capabilities here, but we are going to have a very structured and disciplined approach to like removing the old workflows, the old data, the old, you know, functionality that is basically no longer relevant to us.
Yeah, that's something that you could so easily get so far behind. I mean, you use the words like rat's nest, and if you aren't cleaning up the unused fields and workflows and I mean, Apex code, whatever is being built in there, then it can become a mess. And even just things as simple as duplicates. And that really speaks to the importance of RevOps. Do you think there's a difference between like a CRM admin and a revenue operations or marketing and sales operations person? Like how would you differentiate the two?
Yeah, I think the way I would describe it is CRM administration is a subset of revenue operations, marketing ops, sales operations. I mean, an operations leader is looking at just that, like how does the overall revenue organization operate, and this is about process, it's about the systems for it, it's about getting the right data plumbed through this, and so depending on the size of your business, if you're a small business, you might have one ops person who's both adminning your CRM but also taking responsibility for the ops process and management that happens around that. As you get into larger organizations, typically then like a CRM admin will work on the RevOps team or the sales op team.
Yeah, that's super helpful. It's so important to have somebody who's looking at the kind of whole ecosystem and not just adminning the system. Otherwise, you are going to end up with a little bit of a mess. I guess if there's anybody out there listening and is feeling like, oh gosh, my CRM is kind of it's in a place of no return, right? Like, what advice would you give to maybe start cleaning things up? Is it throw it out and start over, or where would you start?
Actually declaring CRM bankruptcy isn't necessarily the worst idea in the world. I mean, you got to assume, like, if at some level the drag, they talk in software about tech debt, maybe we could call it CRM debt.
Yep.
Like at the point in time you were just under a mountain of CRM debt, and it's preventing you from really getting any forward momentum at that point. This idea of declaring CRM bankruptcy and saying, actually we are going to, whether it's resetting the same software or maybe use as an opportunity to switch to a different CRM platform, and you're like, we're going to pull over just the core data we need from this, the core customer records, maybe some core activity, history, things like this. But we're not going to pull over all the workflows. We're not going to pull over that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're actually going to build up this implementation, starting from a bit of a clean slate, and you would do better of explaining this than I would, because I know you've seen this movie many times, but this isn't a throw it all out and then start from scratch. These implementations are like, okay, this is the old system. We're going to start implementing the new system. We start to build it up. We're actually typically running those two things side by side, for a period of time until we get to a place where, like, okay, we can do a trial switch over. Everything's good, huge, any like major gaping holes. Now we can finally like switch off the old one and move entirely to the new one. But if that might actually be one of your best paths forward if you feel like the weight you're under with your current system just isn't salvageable.
Yeah, I love that term, CRM bankruptcy. Like, it's just let's move on, right? It's time to cut our losses and move on. And I think that what you said about running things side by side is really important. So, I would recommend that people give enough time to do that. That's one of the mistakes I've seen where, like, oh, my CRM is up for renewal in 3 weeks and I think we want to switch. Like, you don't have enough time to do it at that point. You want enough time to, run things side by side for a little while. Otherwise, you'll be in a position, I've been here before, where Saturdays are the new Mondays and you're working late nights and early mornings and weekends to try to get all the data over, and you're at the risk of losing something important at that point.
Yeah.
So giving yourself enough time to run things side by side and get things set up and configured the way you want to, if you are going to switch, is definitely important.
Yeah, because again, as we were talking earlier, it's not just the technical implementations of this. Right. It's the fact that really when you're implementing this, it's now the stakeholders and the different participants and just, the humans in the loop, time cycling there is, it just needs some actual like calendar time to be able to do that properly.
For sure. And I mean, that's a great point too. Just like training your staff on a new system, and like there's sort of a difference between training on how to use the CRM from the CRM provider, and then like training on how do we use our CRM, right? Because everybody's kind of got their own models and like the different like stack of integrations and things like that. So getting your team up to speed on how to use it properly, you got to build in time for like documentation and training and recording your little videos and stuff like that, which is often something that's like after the fact. Oh yeah, nobody knows actually how to do that.
This is all wisdom. Yes. Plus one, plus one, plus one.
Totally. Well, I mean, some of this stuff, it can sound overwhelming, but done right, it just has such a big impact on, you talked about this, like the processes in your business and the decisions that are being made. So it is one to make sure that you're given the right attention to. And there's tons of resources and support out there to help make these decisions and leverage your community and talk to people. I mean, you can outsource any of the like implementation and management. And I know some great RevOps teams that do this outsource. So don't feel like you've got to do this stuff alone. But I know there's like, it does sound a little scary sometimes, but you're not alone.
No,
we can help.
For like, I don't know, a good decade or so, right? We kept talking about this concept of digital transformation, like, oh, we've got to do digital transformation. What exactly that was depended on who you spoke to, but digital transformation. I think at this point in time, post-COVID, we're there, right? I mean, the world has digitally transformed. Businesses operate digitally. Now it's just a question of like, do they operate well, digitally, or are there, a bunch of problems with the digital operations? And so when you recognize that the stakes are like, this actually is the foundation of how you are going to run, the entire customer half, of your business, then you should be willing to like say like, actually doing the CRM and doing it right, it's going to be a big project, but this is the centerpiece, of truly living in a digitally transformed business environment, and tap in the experts and get the benefit of doing it right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this with us today. This is, it's critical to get right. And we really appreciate your expertise and experience in this area. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jen. Really enjoyed the chat.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening in. I will be back with another episode next week. I'll be chatting with Pam Didner. See you then.